Breaking news. Unless the West fully commits to a victory for Ukraine, Putin will win. As the two-year anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine approaches, Vladimir Putin has yet to completely subjugate the country and put an end to Ukrainian independence. Nevertheless, there are no indications that the Russian dictator is looking to end the war. Putin, on the other hand, seems more confident than ever that he can outlast the West in Ukraine and achieve his long-term goals. The unprecedented increase in military spending in Russia's 2024 budget, which is roughly double the figure for the current year, is perhaps the most obvious sign that Putin is preparing for a long war. Even though he knows that doing so will require reductions in areas like social spending, healthcare spending, and educational spending, he is putting the entire Russian economy on a war footing anyway. Putin is also hoping for a favorable shift in international politics. With global audiences and Western leaders growing increasingly tired of the war in Ukraine, Russia has openly welcomed the recent shift in international attention toward the Israel-Hamas conflict. Many in Moscow believe that the current Western focus on Ukraine will diminish in the coming months because the United States is entering an election year. Even though Putin would be interested in hearing from Vice President Joe Biden with a grand bargain proposal to end the war, he is also content to wait until the presidential election in November to see if a potential new American leader might be willing to offer even more enticing terms. Vladimir Putin is confident that the Ukrainian opposition, which lacks his more than 2 decades of international experience, will make blunders that will further erode international support for their country. In particular, he is certain that President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine will irritate Kyiv and the West by repeatedly asking for military aid. Russia has paid a heavy price for its invasion of Ukraine, both in terms of military casualties and the damage to the country's international reputation. Putin, on the other hand, has done a lot to ready Russia for the international isolation it now faces. He has made Russia surprisingly resistant to sanctions and has made some progress toward military-industrial self-sufficiency. The possibility of unrest within Russia is also not a major concern for the Kremlin. While the brief Wagner mutiny provided a glimpse into the vulnerability of Putin's grip on Russia, it is difficult to foresee any future threats to the country's current leadership. There is no domestic political opposition left, and independent media outlets have been completely muzzled. Meanwhile, Putin has been careful to prevent the emergence of any potential rivals from within the ranks of the Russian army, and has kept loyalists like Sergei Shoigu and Valery Gerasimov in top military positions despite their many blunders. Due to these factors, Putin currently has little reason to call off the war. Indeed, any outcome other than an unambiguous Russian military victory would likely lead to uncomfortable questions being asked regarding the sacrifices Russians have made since the start of the invasion. Putin sees greater benefit in prolonging the conflict in Ukraine because of the improved prospects for his country over time. Leaders in Ukraine and the West have obviously been unsuccessful in convincing Putin that the clock is against him. Although this is not an easy goal to accomplish, it is possible with strong military backing and political solidarity. Ukraine's current military strategy centers on using attrition to wear down Russia's armed forces. While this may reduce Russia's offensive capacity, it is unlikely to result in the kind of military victory that the majority of Ukrainians believe their country needs to eliminate the risk of a repeat invasion from Russia in the coming years. Ukraine needs a lot more military aid and unrestricted access to cutting-edge military technology if it is going to be able to defeat Russia decisively in a military conflict. The West unquestionably possesses the means to supply Ukraine with the weapons it requires to counter Russia. Russia's GDP is less than 1% of the total GDP of all NATO countries. Putin is convinced that the democratic world lacks the political will to challenge him because Western leaders have shown reluctance and uncertainty throughout the war. Leaders in the West who are serious about thwarting a Russian victory should show their mettle by making long-term commitments to Ukraine with the explicit goal of a Ukrainian military victory. This would be a significant blow to Moscow's hopes that Western support for Ukraine will eventually fade. Putin himself recognizes that if the West decides to use even a fraction of its vastly superior financial, military, and technological resources, there is no way Russia can hope to compete. Western leaders frequently stress the gravity of the situation in Ukraine. This talk needs to be followed up with action in the coming months. If they don't, Russia will win at a cost that far outweighs what it would take to bolster Ukraine's support. This is a fact of international politics that will remain constant through many administrations and help shape the future of international security.